The one thing that I found really interesting last year was that there weren't a lot of investments in compensation. And the year before that, a lot of compensation suites had been funded. And with, all kinds of developments around the world where you have to be more specific around pay and compensation, my assumption was that founders and investors would see this as a white space and jump on it. And that didn't happen. What made up for it somewhat was the realization that what investors did see as a growing area was the payroll suites, but then not the global ones, but the local ones.
Here's a pre-show scenario for you. Imagine you had to visit 6 houses just to cook your dinner. One place has the pots and pans, one has the stove, another has the food. You get the idea. Sounds ridiculous, right? Well, the reality is most global businesses operate the same way, using 6 different tools just to pay their global workforce. But now there's one platform offering truly simple, truly global payroll, and that's today's sponsor. That's Deal. That's DEEL. With in-house customer success managers, local payroll experts, dedicated points of contact, and more, Deal eliminates third-party handovers and provides unmatched compliance and flexibility. In fact, they'll even help you track and flag the latest changes in payroll regulations before they even become an issue. So are you ready to transform your global payroll system? If you are, click the link in the show notes below to book a demo with Deal today. That's DEEL. Hello and welcome back to the Payroll Podcast. I'm really excited so I get to introduce my guest, Anita Lettink, back to the show, not for the first, second, but the third. No, in fact, it's the fourth time.
The fourth
Thank
time.
you, Anita.
Yeah.
The
Hi,
fourth
Nick.
time. Hello again. Definitely the most popular guest I've had on the show. And I can't stop inviting you back because you are leading the way in this industry. You're such a big influencer in the world of global payroll. And today we're going to continue our conversation, not this time in pay transparency, but actually we're going to talk about the future of work and payroll and HR tech, something I know you're very, very experienced in. We're going to take a deep dive today into your view of the HR and payroll tech landscape, if we can. Now, for those not familiar and why I've invited you back to the show to talk about this, you are recognized as a top 25 future of work global thought leader, a top 10 innovator, and a top 100 HR tech influencer as well. You're the founder of hrtechradar.com and a partner at Strategic Management Center as well. You've been on this show talking about blockchain and crypto in the past. I'm a huge fan of your tech newsletter where you give me all the insights in the trends of investment that are impacting the world of payroll. And we're going to deep dive into those today. But in particular, I was really interested in one of the newsletters you sent through to me, which inspired this conversation. Because you said that in 2023, the HR tech sector had a really tough investment climate. And we felt that in the world of recruitment as well. And I'm sure many people listening to this have felt it in their businesses. However, despite challenging economic times, investments have continued to flow into local HCM suites and payroll tech. And we've seen that as well. We've seen a huge amount of transformation. We've seen a lot of our payroll clients investing in growing their teams, despite the challenging and flattening economic times that we're experiencing. So I wanted to find out today why that is, what you think is still missing from pay tech investments, and how these gaps can be addressed to help us shape the future of payroll. So quite a lot to get into. I hope that's okay. Welcome, Anita, to the show. How are you feeling?
I'm good. And thanks for inviting me. And a warm hello to the audience.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to jump straight into the deep stuff here, just to bring context to the conversation. As I mentioned in my introduction, I read about your 2023 HR tech funding insights. From that, what key areas do you think are currently overlooked when it comes to pay tech investments?
So the one thing that I found really interesting last year was that there weren't a lot of investments in compensation. And the year before that, a lot of compensation suites had been funded. And with, all kinds of developments around the world where you have to be more specific around pay and compensation, my assumption was that founders and investors would see this as a white space and jump on it. And that didn't happen. So there I was a little bit surprised. I think what made up for it somewhat was the realization that what investors did see as a growing area was this HR and payroll, the HR and payroll suites, but then not the global ones, but the local ones. And we had not seen that for a while. I remember during the pandemic, suddenly we saw all these um, global EOR and we pay your global workforce solutions appear. We pay your people, we hire your people in 150 countries around the world. That's great. But the majority of employees for most companies are still local. And many of them had been using either very traditional local systems or one of, I'm going to say, the incumbents. But none of these are natively built on cloud and are natively using the latest technologies. So that is why I find this whole movement towards these local suites so interesting.
So why do you think that is? Because actually, there's two things that come into play here. I'm almost surprised that they haven't invested more in compensation as well. Because one thing we learned from the Great Resignation in the world of recruitment and watching people leave is actually people wanted more holistic compensation packages, that it wasn't just about salary anymore. It's about how we're able to manage work-life balance, how we can become more innovative with our compensation strategies. So a bit like yourself, I'm quite surprised we haven't seen a plethora of new investment in that field. So why do you think there has been a move towards local suites, as you put it?
Well, when you want to build a solution, you obviously want to build it for as many employees as possible because you earn money by charging a fee per employee. With compensation and benefits solutions, there are not a lot of companies that offer them to all of their workforce. Typically, they start with like a subsection, and then you have to wait and see if they like it before it is rolled out to all of the workers. That's not the case with HR and payroll. Everyone will be on. So if you go for the maximum number of employees, then an HR and payroll solution, even though payroll is difficult, will probably get you the largest revenue base. It's my assumption.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I know in your report you said that there was still 4.6 billion raised over 275 rounds in 38 countries. What I thought was really interesting, though, from that stat, being in the world that I'm immersed in, was that HCM and payroll remains the largest category at 1.8 billion across over 42 different deals, which I think really highlights the market emphasis on paying workforces through comprehensive solutions, right? But why do you think that was the most popular? What does that really suggest about the market's priorities?
The interesting thing is that this HCM and payroll section has been the largest for the past 3 to 4 years, which means that there is still a lot of workforce out there that is not being paid or is not registered through these solutions. And one of the things that I also noticed last year in the report is that for the first time, I see these investments evenly spread across the world. Where in the past, these investments often went to, I'm going to say, US headquartered companies that were building global solutions. You now see in a number of continents like Africa, Asia, the Middle East, that local homegrown solutions are starting to come out. And there's a real need for people in the local communities to be supported by HR and payroll solutions because they need to be paid on a regular base and because they need to be paid compliantly and legally.
Which of course links, I guess, back to that local suite piece. I guess it's not just about the global bit. I think one thing that I found really interesting in my space is, and it's interesting you said it's been over the last 3 or 4 years, but I feel like post-pandemic, there's almost been a great awakening of investors or developers or whatever it is that they're designing these things are going, you know what, payroll seems to be an unaddressed market. We've been addressing all these other markets for years and we're reinventing the wheel over and over again. But actually, this is a a department, an industry, a sector that's ripe for innovation. It's ripe for change. And I've never seen so much focus in my time, which is over 20 years in the payroll sector, being put into innovating payroll software and payroll solutions. Do you think, with that in mind, we're going to start seeing that number increase or even have its own category away from HCM, that it's really focused on payroll? Are we still a little bit away from that? What's your view on the market in terms of payroll specific
Yeah,
investment?
I think for now, there's still the route where you first create your HCM suite, and then in a later stage, you add a local payroll, because payroll is a lot more difficult to develop. And so you can bring this HCM suite to market relatively quickly, use some local payrolls uh, for the time being. And then once you're done, you move your clients onto your own payroll. What I find interesting is that when you look at these new payroll solutions that are coming to market, they are built on new technologies. For instance, I wrote a special piece around the African solutions. We are used to solutions that have been designed based on a browser. And of course, later on, we got these apps and we can use them on our mobile phone, but the basic design is the browser. What you see in Africa is that that is not at all the case. They sort of, because they're coming later to the party, I would say, they can skip the browser. They can go mobile right away. And that leads to different designs, leads to different design or product decisions. And therefore, that leads to different products. And I find that hugely interesting.
Is that to improve integration and commerciality? So, for example, if I'm suddenly just, either through acquisition, or I suddenly find I've got a workforce that's now based in Africa, if they've got those solutions, it's much easier for me to integrate into my existing software through API. Is that the reason they're doing it on that platform, or is it a separate reason?
It's a little bit of both, I think. So on the one hand side, you're right. If you already have a workforce on a platform and then you move into Africa, you need a solution to support your African workforce, because not a lot of payrolls natively support African countries. Then you really have to go to the African solutions. But the other thing that we sometimes don't realize is that even if people have a phone, it might not be the modern phone that we have. And
Of course.
so I've also seen solutions work through SMS. And then you really have to design down and create it in a very simple way so that whenever you communicate with users, you can use these short text messages instead of long, I don't know what we use, WhatsApp or iMessages or all kinds of other stuff. And that means that you have to sit down and rethink what you can do within the constraints of the technology that your clients or your employees are using. It's a completely different way of looking at these problems.
There's something that I wanted to come back to. You mentioned what I've seen is a huge plethora of new suppliers coming to the market in the
Yeah.
world of employer of record, or EOR solutions. And you mentioned sometimes and even on our own instance with our US entity, we have someone through an employer of record solution while we build our entity. And when we're big enough, we'll take them onto our own payroll. And
Mhm.
that's often how it's worked. But that market seems to have absolutely exploded. And it seems to have really disrupted the payroll industry as well, because they've come and they've grown so quickly to £1 billion sort of valuations very fast with some
Mhm.
particular businesses. How do you see the role of EOR solutions, I guess, fitting into the payroll ecosystem for the future?
Uh-huh.
I see it as a really positive shift in terms of enabling global workforces to happen quicker, but I'm looking at it from a slightly different lens to maybe a payroll solutions provider that's been there for many years with their payroll platforms. I'd love to get your take.
No, it's a fascinating development, I think, because when you think about the large incumbent payroll providers, they have not been disrupted in maybe 10, 15 years, because it was so costly to become their competitor, right? You needed
Yeah.
so much money to invest in these payroll engines. So when these EORs first came to market, they sort of put that on their head and said, look, we'll create this overlay layer. We will use these payrolls that are available in all these countries. First of all, we don't need the overhead that you have. And second of all, we are not, at the time, we are not creating new payroll engines. We are just reusing what is already there. Now, in the past, I would say 6 months or so, we have started to see some consolidation in the market, right?
Yeah.
We see some incumbents buying these EOR vendors, or as we just saw a couple weeks ago, we see Deal as an EOR vendor buy PaySpace,
Yeah.
PaySpace for the engines. So I think we have not seen the last of the M&A activities yet. There's some others underway that will probably come out sometime second half this year. Interestingly enough, there are still some companies coming to market. Just 2-3 weeks ago, a company in Canada got 27 million to go to the market, also EOR. So this is just fascinating. The question is, when does it stop? And is there some sort of cliff when once we reach it, it just drops off? And this is what it is. And the companies that are now there are the ones that are going to divide the pie.
It's really.
Yeah.
I've actually got the COO of PayScale coming onto the show to talk about the acquisition. So that should be really, really interesting going forward. So what do you then see as being the future trends? I know we talked about this years ago when we talked about blockchain and crypto and things like that. What do you see as the emerging trends in tech investments in particular?
Yeah. So if I look at it right now from an investment in the HR tech space point of view, it is about where it was last year. So it has leveled off. We now are sort of creating a baseline. I don't see it improve very quickly. So we're basically back where we were in 2018, 2019. We can, I think, confidently say that the 3 years during the pandemic were the exception rather than the rule. We won't see those 12 billion HR tech investments shortly. So probably we're back around 3 to 4 million. It's a little bit of a mix. The one thing that I would say today is that when you put AI in your press release, you can probably get an investment round. If that leads to anything fundamental, I am not so sure yet. I have seen a lot of press releases with some sort of, we're doing AI or we're adding generative AI or something similar, but nothing that I thought was changing something fundamental, either in HR or in pay.
Hello, global payroll leaders. Are you facing challenges in finding the right payroll talent for your team? If you are, I hear you, and I'm here to offer you a solution. Because at JGA Payroll Recruitment, we're experts at sourcing, attracting, and engaging with top-tier global payroll talent that really drives business success. So don't let the frustration of finding great payroll professionals hold you back from raising the profile of payroll in your organization. The cost of a poor hire isn't just financial. It costs you time, or worse, it damages the reputation of your payroll operation. That's why we're 100% dedicated to ensuring your recruitment journey with us is nothing short of exceptional. Partner with us at JGA because we're an award-winning global payroll recruitment agency with a proven track record of success. We have over 100 5-star Google reviews, and we're trusted by many of the world's leading brands. And we would love just love to help you elevate your team with the best payroll talent available anywhere in the world. Reach out to us today at 01727 800 or 377 or visit us at jjrecruitment.com. And while you're at it, why not sign up to our weekly payroll newsletter for exclusive industry insights and job opportunities? With us, your perfect payroll opportunity or your perfect payroll hire awaits. Yeah, I think maybe it's still too soon. I think we're still establishing, and we've got ChatGPT 5 still to come. We've got lots of generative languages improving. It's a sector I'm really interested in. I'm doing my own AI certs at the minute, so I can help clients with their what they want to do with AI. But I still think we've got a long way to go yet, and we're still sort of understanding the capabilities of it. And I still think people are getting to grips with it. And I find it really interesting. I get pitched lots of recruitment AI tools, and I look at them and think,
Oh yeah,
that is not ready for the market. I mean, I couldn't ever introduce that into my business, but people are trying.
I think when it comes to AI and HR tech, recruitment is the area where most of the AI is focused on.
Yeah,
And I know some of the vendors almost all of the vendors have announced that they're working on some sort of AI assistant, generative AI to include in their solutions. And I think that is great, but I also think that they went maybe a little bit too fast. Companies in the meantime have started to earn some experience with AI as well. You see some companies that have put in place some rules and some guidelines around the use of AI. And so, if as an HR tech vendor, you cannot clearly explain what you're doing and why, customers are taking a step back simply because there's probably lots of benefits of AI in HR, but is that the first area where you want to experiment, considering that you're running this experiment on all of your workforce?
Yeah.
Probably not. You want to do some pilots and, in a couple of small areas to understand what this could mean for you. I think that, so what I would see as really helpful from an HR perspective, from an AI perspective, is not to focus so much on the front end, where you meet the workforce, but focus a lot more on the back end, where you support payroll professionals, for instance, with mundane type of work. Because I'm going to be a little bit blunt here, we don't need another chatbot. Most companies already have a chatbot. And so another channel to help your employees is probably not helpful to you. But a channel to help your back office people, to help your payroll professionals, that could be enormously helpful because currently they don't have a chatbot. So if you can put something in place to help them do the work, I would be very interested in using that if I were running a payroll department. How about you?
That makes sense. Yeah, no, I mean, to be honest, it's kind of how we're looking to utilize it without taking it to segue off and go off piece too much here. But I'm doing my AI certifications at the moment with a
good for you.
In the US. I'm finding it really interesting, but it's how I can optimize my own workflows, and it makes me realize a lot of the workflows I do in recruitment aren't going to be dissimilar to workflows in payroll or workflows in HR. And it's how we can really streamline the way that we utilize our communication channels without chatbots. I'm not talking about chatbots. I'm really talking about integrating with Zapier and doing other things that just allow our workflows to work more effectively so that I can do more what I'm good at, which is conversations, networking, finding great talent rather than getting lost in emails and diary management and all the other things that can take up a lot of our time. So I think there's a real
but I also the one thing that I find super interesting about generative AI is that for the first time, the computer does not determine how we use it, but we determine how we use a computer. We can talk to it, we can give it an assignment that is maybe not 100% correct, but it will understand what we want and it will run it for us. And so people don't have to learn ABAP or programming language or whatever. They can just say, this is what we want, and it will happen. And even that, I think, will be a huge help and step forward.
Absolutely. I've been using it to create some much more advanced. I've got advanced Excel skills, but I'm now hyper advanced with the use of AI because I can make it write my AI code for me in Excel, and it's been wonderful. Mm-hmm. And it's just a lot of fun. Although you can also lose lots of time by going down the black hole of experimentation. Yeah. I think that's worth adding.
Yes.
And if I get another email that tells me they've got top tier talent, which is such a generative AI term, and there's lots of them, I think, well, you haven't written that, so no. Anyway, I'm going sideways. Something that was really interesting from your report. And I mentioned earlier there was 4.6 billion raised over 275 rounds, 38 countries, but that was actually a 33% decline in rounds compared to the year before, and a 55% decline in total funds raised. I just wondered why you thought that was, and what the long-term effects might have on the payroll tech in particular.
So when you look at the downsizing or the decline in number of rounds, that was everywhere. So that was just an industry trend. It had to do with economic circumstances. It obviously had to do with the fact that money isn't free anymore. And so now, because you have to pay interest rates, you need more of the company, more growth of the company than in the past. So investors have become a lot more careful about who they're giving money to. And you saw that across the board. HR was not an exception. So from that perspective, I think that is the explanation. There's not something super special about HR where we bucked a trend or anything like that.
Okay, that's interesting. So based on your observations then today, what innovations or improvements do you think are critically needed? And you're speaking to clients all over the globe, and you're on the stage as well doing this as keynotes. What do you think that are critically needed in payroll tech in particular to better support organizations and employees? I know you mentioned compensation at the start of the show. Maybe that's part of that. But are there other things as well? We're talking about pay on demand. It feels like every second show as being one of those innovations. Yeah. There might be something further ahead.
Yeah, so pay on demand is an interesting one, because that seems to catch on very locally. For instance, if you look at the UK, if you look at the US, there it really plays a significant role. When you look at mainland Europe, for instance, hardly. There are a few companies that offer it, but it's not a benefit that a lot of employees are asking for. Now, if you move further east, there were definitely a number of funding rounds in Asian companies that support EWA, and also this year there were a number of investments in EWA providers, like in Indonesia and I think India. So there are bits and pieces that are more popular in some regions than in others. And I have to think that it probably has to do with the fact that everything around payroll in Europe, in mainland Europe, is so regulated. It will be difficult to add something like EWA. It can be done, but probably not as needed as in other parts of the world. When I look at the current investment trends, it's a little bit of everything. There isn't a specific trend, not that I have. It's also early, right? We're only approaching the end of March.
Yeah.
And so we have 3 months behind us, and it's probably not the best quarter of the past years. Let me put it that way. I was looking at the numbers earlier last week, and yeah, I'm still debating a little bit about what trends I'm discovering here, but probably in a couple of weeks you will read about them in the newsletter. I'll try to come up with something.
Amazing. And I will put a link to your wonderful newsletter so people can get a copy of that, because it's good.
Mm-hmm.
So out of interest, and this is a question that comes up a lot, particularly when I speak to the providers who will tell me they either can already do it or they're going to be able to do it soon. The global payroll providers in the tech space that say, we can pay every person in every country with our solution anywhere in the world. I get another supplier will tell me that will never happen. So for someone who's in this space, are we going to see a solution that can truly deliver that capability or not? And if so, if you do think it's going to happen, how long will it be until we have that kind of solution available?
Okay. So, are there payroll engines that can run payroll across the globe? Yes. How we know that SAP, for instance, has an engine that runs 50 countries. You can add more countries if you want to. Um, they are building a new one, as you might know.
I do. Yep.
Companies like Workday have a solution that runs in more countries around the world. So there are engines that support more countries. The problem then is, do you have enough customers in a particular country to warrant the investment that you need to do and creating the local solution, the country solution, and then maintaining it over time? And while building the engine might not be hugely costly, although it is costly, every country that you adds the same amount of investment. It takes the same amount of time. Some are a little bit more uh, or a little bit less complex than others. But you will have to maintain them. You will have to talk to the local tax authorities to make sure that you have the right tax tables, for instance. You need to make sure that all social security laws are in. And then everything else from a labor perspective that sits in the local legislation. It is not zero. I think that is the greatest barrier, because
Okay.
if you just have, let's say, 40 employees in a country that you run payroll for, there is no way that you can afford to build and create an engine. So it's ultimately more about the size of the workforce that you can expect to cover on this payroll than it is about the technical difficulty, because that you can manage.
Yeah, okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Well, something I wanted to bring to the fore, and I was very lucky and privileged to be asked to write a testimonial for your wonderful book, How
Yes.
to Select Your Next Payroll, The Ultimate Guide. It was wonderful to see it in
Thank
published inside
you.
the front cover.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. But I also want to bring it to the masses here because it is a costly exercise, particularly if we get it wrong.
Uh-huh.
Right. So if we try to implement a new payroll, we want to make sure we get it right first time. We want to make sure we're selecting the right supplier. We also know that every sales team you speak to is going to be, pushing their wares for different reasons and different things. So you've written a wonderful guide. I think it's the most comprehensive guide that's ever been written. There aren't probably that many of them, but to come from an expert like yourself, it's really useful. As I had a privilege to support the publication. I will put a link to it in the show notes for those who want to buy a copy. It's available on Amazon and on your own website as well. But I wonder if you can just give us a bit of a flavor of what the book covers, why it might be helpful for our listeners so they understand what they might gain from the book.
Yeah, so I regularly help people to select a new payroll. And I noticed shortly before I wrote the book that a number of payroll go lives went wrong in such a way that employees were not getting paid. And that's a huge problem. You know that. Some people do not have money on the bank. And so if their payslip is not correct, that is an immediate threat to their livelihoods. And when I started to look into that, I discovered that it was never one payroll vendor. It was not one solution. It was simply the fact that during the project, there was a miscommunication between the implementation party and the customer because they don't speak the same language. Remember that, a customer probably changes payroll every 10 years, and a payroll vendor or a solution provider does this on an ongoing base. They think that they use the same language, but they speak the same words. And that is something completely different. And so what I tried to do was, because I've worked for a payroll vendor for a very long time, to give people some insights into what are payroll vendors looking for, what do you need to get ready on your end, and how can you help yourself get a proposal that is aligned with your needs where the vendor also understands what you want. So basically, what I try to do in the book is equip customers to better express themselves when they go out into the market and select a new payroll.
Well, in fact, I'm just thinking, I think I've got a copy of it here on my bookshelf. If I have, I'll quickly grab it and show the
I got it. It's here.
Here we are. You can see it. There we are.
You have it?
Yes, there it is. So it is a wonderful book, and I think for the what is a very, very small investment for people, it could save you a whole lot of time, a whole lot of money. And there's loads to learn from this as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, we know that payroll people are really passionate about raising the profile. People want to raise their strategic roles in their own organizations. I'm telling you, this is an absolute Bible to help make that transition. It's a fantastic publication. I wouldn't have supported it and endorsed it if I didn't believe so. So I do recommend everyone goes and gets a copy on Amazon. So that's my action point for everybody. My last question for you, Anita, is this. Is there anything that I haven't asked that you think actually with the knowledge I've got, with what I've been seeing over the last 3 months in the HR and payroll tech space, innovative space, that perhaps our listeners can go, okay, this might be worth me taking note of, or something they can go and do, or anything you think I haven't asked yet that might just be useful for our listeners today?
I think so. I want to catch on to your last remark, where you mentioned how the strategic role of payroll professionals. And I think there's a huge opportunity right now for this strategic role, especially with developments like new compensation plans. We talked about that a little bit. So with the future of work, all kinds of new ideas around compensation and benefits are coming up, and you want to play a role there. And then there's also pay transparency legislation, same thing. So a strategic role for payroll professionals is definitely possible. But the one thing you need to do is establish your credibility. And your credibility comes from a timely, accurate, and compliant payroll. Start there. If that is under control, then you can make that strategic role happen. I have no doubt about that.
Well, that's really, really encouraging. Now, listeners are going to like to hear that, because that's exactly, I couldn't agree with you more. We haven't got away from the fundamentals of what payroll is. And once you've got those fundamentals under control, then we can really deep dive into analytics and systems and strategic importance. And I think that's really, really exciting. I think that probably wraps up another insightful episode of the Payroll Podcast. I might have to bring you on a 5th time, Anita, to talk about the strategic role. But I'll give you a little bit of a break. I've used up a lot of your time over the last few weeks to come onto the show. I'm eternally grateful for you joining me again on the Payroll Podcast. So a huge thank you for you today. I hope our listeners have enjoyed listening to your expertise as you shed the light on the crucial areas within pay tech investments, and of course HR tech investments as well, which really do demand our attention. I think it's not only highlighted the gaps, but hopefully has helped our listeners sort of really pave the way for potential innovations, and how we can, as you finish the show with, how we can really strategically improve the profile of payroll as well. So super, super exciting. Thank you ever so much. Of course, for anyone who's been really inspired by our discussion today, if you want to find out more, please do go to Amazon and find a copy of this book. There will be a link in the show notes, but also go to Anita's website. It's anitalettink.com. You can subscribe to her wonderful newsletter. You can also go to hrtechradar.com as well and subscribe that way. It's really good for those interested in exploring the latest HR and payroll tech trends. So do take a look at that. And I will mention as well, if you didn't catch our previous episode on pay transparency, then Anita's also written a wonderful book called Equal Pay for Equal Work. Go and check out that podcast episode. You'll find out a lot more about that subject. There's a link for that book as well. Finally, I just want to say a huge thank you to you, our listeners, for joining me again on the Payroll Podcast, for listening again today. Please do share this episode with your colleagues and friends. I'll be eternally grateful if you can leave us a little review, if you can share it, subscribe to it, follow us also on YouTube. That'd be wonderful. We're really trying to raise the profile of payroll globally, so we can really, really make payroll the strategic powerhouse we know it can be in the world. So please do take the time to do that. And of course, if you do need support with a payroll vacancy, get in touch with myself and my team at jgarecruitment.com. Just leaves me to say one huge thank you to Anita Letink for joining me again on the Payroll Podcast for the 4th time. My name is Nick Day. I'm your host. Anita, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
This episode is sponsored by Deal. That's DEEL. Deal is your forever people platform built to simplify your entire global payroll process. Deal's fully managed global payroll makes it possible to pay your entire team in over 100 countries and in over 200 currencies, all in one place. So whether you're an enterprise business, a small company, or something in between, Deal is built to meet your unique business needs. So if you're ready to transform your global payroll system, click the link in the show notes to book a demo with Deal today. That's DEEL.